Good day, good people of SEOF. We welcome you to SEOF Academia, Retina Subspecialty. Where we are heading to really is retina detachment, but I thought we should take time and discuss relevant retina anatomy before we eventually get there, as I believe this will enhance understanding of the subject proper when we get to discussing it. So traditionally, as we know, anatomy is divided into gross, histology, and embryology. So we'll take it along that line. First of all, we deal with gross anatomy of the retina. The retina is the thin, transparent, photosensitive layer of the eye that lines the inner aspect of the posterior two-thirds of the eye. In this way, it forms the innermost tunic of the eye, the middle one being the vascular uvea, then the outermost tunic being the corneoscleral coat, which is tough so that it serves a protective function. On ophthalmoscopy, a look at the retina, we say it's transparent, but you have a look at the retina ophthalmoscopically, it appears pinkish, really. This is because of the huge choroidal vasculature that aborts it posteriorly. Actually, it would have appeared redder than we see it. It would have been plethoric red, considering the vasculature of the choroid. However, we'll remember that between that thin, transparent neurosensory retina and the choroid, there's a layer of retinal pigment epithelium, which is melanin laden. So that is what tampers or reduces the level of redness we see. So on ophthalmoscopy, the retina appears reddish or pinkish, really, or pinkish yellow. I've mentioned that the choroid aborts the retina posteriorly, but in front is vitreous that borders with it anteriorly. The vitreous, remember, is actually enclosed in a very thin membrane, almost imperceptible. So, but giving us what we know as anterior vitreous phase and posterior vitreous phase. So most of the retina aborts anteriorly with the posterior vitreous phase. Now let me mention at this point that posterior vitreous phase thin membrane has areas of strong attachment to the retina, and this becomes clinically significant in some conditions like posterior vitreous detachment. It's strongly attached around the optic disc, around the macula, around the major vessels, that the superiotemporal, inferiotemporal, and the supranasal, infranasal branches of the retinal artery. Then the strongest attachment is at ora serrata. Why this is important to note is that while posterior vitreous detachment is, and most times actually is, an innocuous event, some of these areas of strong attachment may actually hold tight during the posterior vitreous detachment, such that a retinal tear can occur there. So PVD is not always an innocuous event. Retina starts at the periphery, edge of the optic discs, and extends to terminate peripherally at the ora serrata. That's the anterior termination of the retina. Then some structures you will find on the retina as you look. Maybe the first that is worthy of mention is the optic disc, which is a gold coin located slightly superior nasally from the center of the retina. So if you're doing ophthalmoscopically, the patient is looking straight ahead position, and you're also coming into the eye in straight ahead position, you may need to bend a little upwards and nasally, and you will locate the optic disc. It represents the anatomical site of aggregation of the retinal nerve fibers, so that they form the cranial nerve too, which we also know as the optic nerve or optic disc. That's the beginning of it. Again, on that same optic disc, we note that retinal vessels emerge and exit from its very center. The central retinal artery emerges to divide into the superior and inferior branches, which in turn divide into temporal, that is each superior and inferior, and in turn divide into temporal and then nasal branches. So we have superior temporal retinal artery, inferior temporal retinal artery, superior temporal temporonasal retinal artery, and superior inferior nasal retinal branch. These branches, first they form a plexus in nerve fiber layer. Then they send down branches to form another plexus in the inner nuclear layer, both of which supply what we know as the inner retinal layer and about half of the inner aspect of the middle retinal layer. When we get to histology, we will know about these layers. While the outer aspect of the middle retina and the rest of the outer retina, that is towards outer plexiform, inner photoreceptor layer, and the rest, derive their circulation, their supply from the choroidal circulation. Well, in about 20, normally the macula derives its supply from twigs from superiotemporal and inferiotemporal branches. But about 20% of people are lucky that God has given them extra supply just in case. Those are the ones that also have supply from cilioretina, that have cilioretinal artery, which is a branch that comes from the posterior ciliary artery. The clinical significance of this is that peradventure there is an occlusion of the retinal artery. They still have a supply from that cilioretinal artery, so they don't suffer, the macula doesn't become ischemic. So the visual, the reduction in vision, if at all you have, is not as significant as it is in central retinal artery, where the patient has only supply from the retinal artery. Let me also mention at this point that the eye is the only place in the body where vessels, blood vessels, can be viewed in the living without making a cut. Okay, if there is a clear media, clear cornea, clear lens, and clear vitreous, and probably dilate the eye and do a good ophthalmoscopy, you can actually observe the vessels live and observe any abnormality without cutting a patient or even causing much discomfort. The importance of this is that this places ophthalmologists in a very unique position in management of diabetes mellitus generally. Apart from the eye, which we are primarily concerned about in diabetes, to observe the effects of diabetes on those vessels live, you can actually see the consequence of the damage in form of hard exudates, blood hemorrhages, flame-shaped hemorrhages, cotton wool spots, development of new vessels. And why I say we are in a unique position is that, one, we don't need to cut a patient or cause more discomfort to make these observations. Then, whatever is happening to the eye is mirrors or reflects what is happening in the rest of the body. So I think physicians should actually be looking properly at our observations in the eye of diabetics, as it will guide them as to what is happening in the rest of the body with regards to diabetic damage. Again, retinal thickness varies in different parts of the retina. The retina is not equally thick in all its parts. Okay. While it's thickest just close to the optic disc when the nerve fiber layer is thickest as it aggregates to form the optic disc. It measures about 400 microns at that point. It thins away to become only 80 microns thick at the extreme periphery. This has some clinical significance. For instance, if you're doing pan-retinal photocoagulation, you should know that as you go to the thinner area, the settings will be reduced so that the bond doesn't become much, and so many other little clinical significances. It's also worthy of mention that at the center of the macula, where we have the fovea depression, is also thinned to about 150 micron. Okay. The center of the macula, or what we call the anatomist's macula or the posterior pole, is actually important to mention that the thickness of the retina, which is higher centrally, high central, due to concentration of photoreceptors in the center. This is necessary because we know that the center, the macula, actually subserves acute vision. So because of this concentration of photoreceptors and retinal cells in the center, metabolic activities, most of the metabolic activities is very high in the center of that retina. So the importance of this is, it means, so to say, that it is the center, the posterior pole, which is the area enclosed by the temporal vascular arcade, is what subserves vision, essentially. In fact, some retinal specialists will always say that, can make some statement, I don't really agree with it, that peripheral retina is useless. You know, that you can actually do without it, but it's not completely true. So, but it's to highlight that the posterior pole is where the activity is. There's very high metabolic activity there, there's very high oxygen demand there. The importance of this is that is where you have the effects of diabetic retinopathy happening there first. Because they demand so much oxygen, they don't tolerate ischemia. They don't tolerate those shortage in blood supply that comes with vascular occlusions and damage to vessels that happen in diabetic retinopathy. So that is where the effects of diabetic retinopathy starts first. The other importance, like I mentioned earlier, is that even in peripheral diseases or mid-peripheral diseases like retinitis pigmentosa, we observe that daytime vision is preserved initially because the cones are in the center, they subserve the daytime vision. So a lot of them has no problem with daytime vision initially, until eventually when the mid-peripheral disease extends peripheral, then start coming to the center. That's when they start having problem with daytime vision. The other importance of this is pan-retinal photocoagulation. When we do it, we usually spare the center. We don't do it within the area enclosed by the temporal vascular arcade. So that means, in fact, in the earlier when we are doing scatter photocoagulation, people practically destroy peripheral retina. But these days, pattern photocoagulation is done, so the tissues are not completely destroyed. So patients don't come with peripheral visual defects. So the point to note is that a lot of metabolic activity, a lot of visual activities that lead to vision or otherwise happen in the center of retina. So the very center of retina is very important. We also need to talk about an important anatomical area of the eye, which is the macula. Okay? Macula can be described in terms of the anatomist's definition, histologist's definition, and clinician's definition. The anatomist's macula is just that area, or also known as posterior pole, is the area enclosed by the temporal vascular arcade. While histologically, any area of retina that has more than one ganglion cell layer is also described as the macula. So that very center of the retina that substantial acute vision actually has more than one ganglion cell layer. That's what helps it in functioning. There's also a clinician's macula, which is the area we look at, concentrate when we do ophthalmoscopy and describe as macula. It's an area that is 1 disc diameter in size and 2 disc diameters temporal to the optic disc. Okay. That's the area we usually note drusen's, diabetic macular edema, Best's disease, Stargardt disease. That's the area they usually affect. And when this happens, vision is usually severely affected. We will have to pause here. We will come back with the histology and a little embryology of the retina. Thank you.